right, good afternoon and welcome to the City Council Special Study Session meeting of Tuesday, February 27th. I now call the meeting to order. Before we do the roll call, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please do the roll call?
Let the record reflect that all council members are present except for Councilmember Marr.
All right, well done. Okay, we do public comments when we do study sessions, just a couple of to orient everybody about study sessions. Study sessions are a lot less formal. So you might see in our attire, we're less formal and we call each other by each other's first names. If we want to, we don't have to, that's optional. And then the other thing is in terms of public comments, instead of 3 minutes, you get 2 minutes. Although it doesn't look like there's that many people. So if people, Council, are you okay with 3 minutes? Yeah, 3 is fine. But you can only speak to the item on the agenda. And the item on the agenda, which will be read officially, but it's the study session regarding the proposed in lieu housing fee, state density bonus, and affordable housing strategies and options. So pretty much anything pertaining to the affordable housing ordinance that we've been discussing is fair game for the public comments. So 3 minutes, we'll go to the council chambers first. We'll get the microphones up. Give me a second. And then you'll hear when you have 1 minute left, you'll hear a beep, and then you'll also see a sign like a flashing light or whatever, and then your microphone will cut off after 3 minutes. Are you good with the 3 minutes? Okay, let's go. Who wants to speak? Everybody, mad rush to come up to speak. Anybody? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, I'm not going to invite you individually, so you have to come up. Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Anyway, we can hear the staff report first.
No, but you read it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's probably not going to say much different than that, so go ahead.
Sounds good. Adam Wood, BIA, thank you for the opportunity to comment. We submitted a letter, so just wanted to highlight that. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. Specifically, we call out what we've seen happen in Santa Ana. It's been cited many times as an example. When you look in...
Excuse me for a second. Let me stop your time, Adam. So I didn't get that letter. Did anybody else get the letter from the BIA?
It came in late, unfortunately. Okay. So we will resend it to you so you can see it before next time.
Right, but is there a way to get it to the council so we could read it during the study session? Did it come, did you send it to the council?
Clerk.
To the clerk? Okay. So since we didn't get the letter, you go ahead and summarize it as best you can, and we'll still try to get it and read it during the study session. Thanks.
No worries.
Go right ahead.
Short version of the long story then. We took a look at Santa Ana. I know it's been cited as an example. They purport to say that they've got a $15 a square foot fee over there. The staff report tonight says that they're charging a $20 fee. If you go through their own data, last week they had council and staff interacted and highlighted this in their own staff reports from 2021. They look back, no fee has ever been received into their WHO that has actually paid the $15 a square foot. That shines a light, it highlights it, it's the example that inclusionary is hard to get right. Another good example is in Tustin. They've had their inclusionary program in place since 2018. Total of 10 affordable units have come forward since then, but 6 of those units probably are never going to get built. So we're looking at maybe 4 units probably getting built. It's an extremely difficult policy to get right. If you're going to err on the side of conservatism and don't overstate it, this is a great way to kill housing, much more than create housing. So that's the biggest concern. Want to reiterate again, we submitted our letter at the last hearing that goes through what Planning Commission came up with. I think there's a lot of really powerful ideas to build off of from there, and hopefully we can kind of have a conversation that heads in that direction again. But most importantly, again, 0 coming in at what the recommended fee is under the Santa Ana policy. Let's not do the same here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Tim?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I thought I'd just reiterate the last speaker's comments. I mean, Tim O'Brien with Legacy Partners, we did develop a project in Santa Ana. We paid $5. There's been about 5,000 units built there. I think the average was about $5. It varied at a low of $3 to $9. So $5 was the average, and that's what worked there. We've been talking about an inclusionary, up to date, we've been talking about inclusionary. I've been encouraging that inclusionary be below a 10.5 level, just because that level, anything above that level really it really diminishes our ability to attract landowners or building owners to sell land to us to build. We're just a conduit again to provide housing, and that was the whole purpose of Measure Y. And so I'm afraid when I look at the rates that have been outlined here, it almost becomes a de facto Measure Y, which really concerns me. If at a proper rate, it's a good alternative, I'd love to see that alternative open to projects above 50 units. Below 50 units is not something that we build. So you take kind of a group of developers that this wouldn't even really apply to. And then just a note on a personal experience where we were entitling a site down in North San Diego County, 35 units of entry-level for sale housing. The city decided during the process to implement a $15 per square foot in lieu fee. The result was $1 million impact on a site that we were buying for $2 million. And when we went back to the seller, said, we've got an extra $1 million burden here, they said, well, we can't deal with that. So because of that, 35 for sale units did not happen at $650,000 per unit. So talk about a barrier to entry-level for sale housing. So, for sale housing is not our typical bailiwick, but I know that you want to encourage it, and I'd really look at that value hard and see what that does to the for sale builders. Thank you.
Tim, stay up there for a second. I just want you to confirm this kind of in the spirit of our informality.
Sure.
So this is Bloom that you did in Santa Ana, and here are the statistics I have for it. And just let me know whether these are accurate. 226 units, is that accurate?
Correct.
The average size of the units is 811 square feet.
It was more like 825, but close enough.
Okay, close enough. And you said you paid $5 a square foot in an in lieu fee, and then that yielded about $922,800.
Close enough, correct.
Okay.
And we were one of the first to pay it. Frankly, the HOO fee really wasn't paid. It had become 15. It was reduced back down to 5 because nobody was developing. So.
All right. I just want to make sure the data I received regarding that project was accurate.
That's right. Thanks.
Anybody else want to speak from the audience? Anybody on Zoom? Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, Cynthia McDonald, please.
Hi, Cynthia. You have the floor. 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm glad that most of the parts of the ordinance were restored at the last meeting. I guess this meeting is supposed to get us another step closer to adopting it, but the city needs to get this adopted in time to report to the HCD that we are achieving the objectives of our housing element. The 2023 report must be due soon. I urge you to make the ordinance, including the in lieu fee calculation, as simple as possible for the first few years. Don't make this so complicated that it becomes difficult and costly to administer by both the city and the landlords and developers. If the city wants this program to be successful, it needs to be efficient. You also need to create a program for the use of the in in lieu fees. Don't delay on that and have the funds build up in a housing trust with no goal for the use of the funds. In terms of the amount of the in lieu fees, you are already pairing the fees with a low percentage of required units. So don't make them too low. The point is to get affordable units built, and they will get built. Just look at Santa Ana and Irvine. Please keep in mind that developers will complain they aren't making enough money even when they are raking in hefty profits. It's a negotiation tactic that's been used many times, so don't fall for it and cave to their demands. Do what is best for the city and its residents who greatly need affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody else on Zoom?
Yes, Kathy Esfahani.
Kathy, you have the floor.
Good evening. I would like to immediately refute the assertion by the gentleman from the BIA that no affordable units got built in Santa Ana. In 2021 and 2022, there were 175 very low-income units built and 21 low-income units built. So to say that their affordable housing ordinance is not working there is false. I would like to, before addressing the in lieu fees that are proposed, which I think are way too low, I agree with Cynthia McDonald. I wanted to mention that something happened at the last city council meeting. Something got slipped in, a change based on a request by Mr. Sakioka. And it was a request that a developer could meet the affordable housing requirement with, quote, an equivalent community benefit. I would like to point out that this whole discussion, all of this work is about creating affordable housing. We must not lose our sight of that objective. And so I urge you to, when this comes back to council, to delete that alternative and require only affordable housing as what will meet the requirement. So on to the in lieu fees. I have to say that the in lieu fees proposed will significantly weaken an already weak proposal. Just to point out that the threshold of 15 units is way too high. I know that's something we need to address again in terms of the entire ordinance, but just to talk in terms of in lieu fees, in Huntington Beach, the threshold is 3 units, and that's when in lieu fees begin. In Santa Ana, it's 5. Even in San Clemente, which is no bastion of concern for people with affordable housing needs, 6 units is the threshold to start. So we need to address that and lower the threshold here. In terms of the sliding scale that is proposed, I think it makes no sense at all. As Cynthia McDonald already pointed out, you are already requiring such a low percentage of units. I mean, such a low, low percentage of affordable units. If the density is below 60 units per acre, that to then drop the in lieu fee even further for small projects between 15 and 20, it makes no sense. You know, for example, if you look at the what Santa Ana requires for 15 units, it's a $12 per square foot fee. In Costa Mesa, it's $1.97. Really, our affordability gap is going to be much higher than Santa Ana's because our market rate units are so much more expensive. So
Kathy, that's your 3 minutes. Anybody else on Zoom?
Yes, phone number ending in 613.
I'll get you, George. Yes? You got the floor. $613, was it? 613, phone number ending in 613, you have the floor.
Yes, hi, good evening. Just some concerns about this. I feel that the city is so gung-ho with affordable housing that we're not thinking about what that does to the future and what it actually does to the people who potentially live in affordable housing. When you acquire an affordable housing unit, that really does deter people from moving up in society and finding better ways of income and such. So it's concerning to me, and I do understand that it's expensive to live here, but it's also expensive to live here because of all the taxes. You know, we pay so much in gasoline tax. We're the highest tax state in the country. So if we're looking to make more affordable housing, maybe we look at the government and start cutting back the taxes, and that'll help with that. But again, in thinking about, okay, the affordable housing units are built, what guarantees do we have to see that these people better themselves instead of become stagnant and, you know, just not better themselves and just accept that they're going to be their place for the rest of their life in society? I really don't like the fact that the government, that we're forcing people to be complacent, because that's not what makes society great. What makes society great is people strive to better themselves. And it's scary that this council is just so hell-bent on making Costa Mesa a low-income city all over the place. So please, you know, build in some safeguards for us so we know that people who are in affordable housing are trying to better themselves, and this is not just the end of the road for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, George, you wanted to come up and there was a comment made specifically about you, so you're welcome to address it or take your 3 minutes if you wish.
George Sakioka of Sakioka Company. Just a point of clarification. I don't know specifically the language that the previous speaker was speaking to, but one of the things that I did mention, in order to satisfy, and we submitted our email comments previously during the inclusionary housing ordinance hearings, but what we specifically were looking toward is to be able to, one option, again, multiple paths to satisfy the affordable housing condition or component. One would be to dedicate land. And I believe that is what we were speaking about, being able to dedicate land to the city or to some approved nonprofit affordable housing developer that the city could utilize to actually get the housing built and have it 100% affordable, because many of our discussions with staff in the previous, it's a much simpler process for them actually to get built, to get financed, and actually have the affordable units built. I think that's more specifically what we were aiming towards, at least have that flexibility for different size projects, of course. But thank you very much. And we could revisit the email that I sent a number of meetings ago. Thanks so much.
No. Yeah, I know what she was referring to. She's referring to the development agreement language. It was different than the language that you proposed. Okay, nobody else, so I'll close public comment. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
Yes, this is study session regarding the proposed in lieu housing fee, state density bonus, and affordable housing strategies and options. Presentation by Ms. Gallardo-Daly, Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. Cecilia Gallardo-Daly, Assistant City Manager and Acting Director of Economic and Development Services. Here with me today is Nancy Nguyen. Nancy is our Principal Planner and Staff Lead on this affordable housing program. I also have Scott Drapkin here, the Assistant Director of the department, and Kathy Head. She's the President of Kaiser Marston and Associates, who has been helping us with our analysis and development of the program. So I'm going to kick things off here. I'm going to talk about our community characteristics, our overall affordable housing strategy, and then I'll turn it over to Kathy to talk about the data and the fee analysis details, and then Nancy will wrap it up for us, and then of course we'll be available for any questions.
Cecilia, before
Yes.
you go on, and I hope this doesn't break your flow too much, but I could see it's a long PowerPoint with a lot of different sections. So would you mind, when you get to a certain natural place in the section, check in with the council, see if we have any questions on that section, and then let's do the other ones. Okay?
Certainly, yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so this information on community demographics is part of the community profile for Costa Mesa that's in the housing element. So just some background. Approximately 40% of the Costa Mesa community is comprised of extremely low, very low, and low income households. Approximately 29% of the community qualifies for very low or extremely low income housing. Lower income households can't afford to own or rent in Costa Mesa without experiencing overpayment, and I'll talk about that in a bit. This indicates that the production of and access to affordable housing options for lower income households should be a priority. Affordable housing is defined in state law as not paying more than 30% of a household's gross income on housing costs. Yet nearly half of the renters in Costa Mesa experience housing costs that exceed 30% of their gross income, and over 25% of the renters experience severe housing costs that exceed 50% of their gross income. Overpayment is an indicator of the lack of affordable housing options and high costs compared to household incomes. Costa Mesa has an extremely low housing vacancy rate, which indicates that there is a high demand for housing, but low supply to fulfill the housing needs in the city. With high demand and low supply, rental and ownership housing prices tend to be higher, and is one of the factors that contributes to the lack of affordable options in the city. Costa Mesa's housing stock was primarily built prior to 1990, with almost a quarter of that stock built around the time the city was incorporated in the 1950s. A little over 2% of the housing stock in the city was built after 2010. The lack of newer housing stock has contributed to the low supply and high rental and housing costs. Housing needs are also influenced by the unique requirements and preferences of certain age groups. Costa Mesa's population has shown aging trends, with the population age 65 and over experiencing the most growth in the city between 2010 and 2018. An aging population could result in changing needs and demands for different types of housing. Seniors tend to have less flexible income and more fixed income. With the housing prices in rental and ownership housing costs, affordable housing options for seniors is a priority. While the population has been aging in recent years, young adults 20 to 34 years of age also represent the largest age group in Costa Mesa at over 25% of the city's population. And like the senior age group, young adults tend to also have a comparatively lower income and therefore tend to favor apartments or, where feasible, smaller, more affordable single-family units, townhomes, or condominiums. So in order to address these housing needs, the housing element itself includes over 40 programs for a comprehensive strategy. We have a goal in the housing element to facilitate the creation and availability of housing for all income levels. Specifically, we have Program 2A in the housing element, which is the adoption of an inclusionary housing ordinance, which establishes that new housing projects provide for a certain percentage of affordable units for moderate, low, or very low income households, and the option for the payment of funds in lieu of providing those affordable units on site. And one important thing to note is the adoption of an inclusionary housing ordinance is required to obtain certification of the city's housing element. The goal of an affordable housing ordinance is to ensure housing is built to serve households at all income levels, and that much needed affordable housing is produced along with the market rate units. The proposed affordable housing program is intended to promote the development of affordable housing without unduly constraining the creation of market rate housing. The ordinance proposed is intended to carefully balance the city's housing needs with the needs of property owners and developers, while also considering the added value from future rezoning to allow more or new density. The ordinance assists in two distinct ways to provide affordable housing opportunities. First, it leverages the private sector's ability to get homes built. It requires affordable units as part of new residential development to ensure units are built on site and integrated into a housing project to the greatest extent feasible. The Affordable Housing Program also creates a new source of financing for affordable housing with the payment of funds in lieu of the project proponent providing the specified affordable units on site, providing developers with more flexibility. This ordinance was developed with best practices and known industry standards in local government for affordable housing development. And in addition, the information you'll see in this presentation is based on Costa Mesa specific data. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Kathy from Kaiser Marston. Does the council have any questions based on that background information?
Any questions so far? No? We're good? Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Kathy Head. I'm president of Kaiser Marston. I prepared your financial evaluation that set the original recommendations for the underlying production requirements for the inclusionary housing program. And so tonight, I'm here primarily to discuss the in lieu fee analysis that accompanies that. Keep going. So just to recap where we've been, the Planning Commission met on November 13th and looked at the draft ordinance and provided a number of recommendations to the draft ordinance and passed it along to the City Council at a 5-2 vote. Subsequently, on January 16th, yes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we do. Did you not get yours? Yeah, just keep, it's page, she's at page 7, it looks like.
Yes.
If you look on the screen. Do you have it on your screen? Yeah, all good? Thanks. You bet.
Okay. On January 16th, you all met and then made some more recommendations to changes to the draft ordinance, and you voted 4-2 to give a first reading to the revised ordinance and asked for the in lieu fee analysis to be brought back before a second reading or revisions, new revisions to the ordinance. So just to briefly recap where we are after that vote on the 16th, the project threshold size, so the size at which a project would be subject to the inclusionary housing requirements is 15 units or above. So projects with fewer than 15 units would not be subject to the ordinance requirements. Then we created two different categories for rental projects. One category is projects at 60 units per acre density or greater, and one at 60 units per or below 60 units per acre. Based on the financial evaluation that we discussed, well, several times, the recommended percentages for the inclusionary housing requirement were either an 11% low-income requirement or a 7% very low-income requirement at the developer's selection, at their full discretion. For projects with fewer than 60 units per acre, the standards that were recommended are 6% low income or 4% very low income, again, at the developer's discretion. Ownership, no specific production requirement was identified in the motion in the first reading. The in lieu fee would be allowed to be paid for any project, but the in lieu fee, just for your references purposes, was calculated as though the requirement was 5%. Moderate. But again, developers could produce the units or pay the in lieu fee no matter what the size of the project is. The covenant period is 55 years, at least 55 years for rental projects, and if ownership units are developed under the program, it'd be 45 years. Again, this is now just a discussion of what requirements would be on the production of inclusionary units. The idea is that the affordable units would need to be proportional to the unit mix of the overall market rate project, so an equivalent percentage of 2-bedroom units, 3-bedroom units, et cetera, as are provided in the market rate project. A concession that was provided in this, in the characteristics, was they could be no more than 15% smaller than the average market rate unit of that number of bedrooms. And then finally, they would have to be evenly distributed throughout the project. So the affordable units would be evenly distributed throughout. In lieu fee payment, the recommendation at the first reading was that the threshold be set at 50 or fewer units. And then, as I mentioned before, for ownership projects, all projects would be eligible to pay. There are other options besides production and in lieu fee payment, although I will tell you those are the most commonly used provisions in my experience. But one is land dedication, which Mr. Sakioka also mentioned, or off-site construction of affordable units, on-site construction of rental units in an ownership project. Those are the other compliance alternatives. And then the incentives, so there was a great deal of discussion throughout the various meetings that we've had, which was to say, now, what is the city doing to make it more feasible for developers to provide these inclusionary units? And so the key is that residential unit uses would be allowed in commercial industrial corridors where they're not allowed now, and an increased density levels from what the standards currently are in the city for residential development. The other incentive to just use the straight inclusionary program is that low-income rents are based on, the calculations of the rents are based on 80% of area median income, as compared to the state density bonus that requires the rents for low-income units to be calculated based on 60% of area median income. Another incentive being considered is reducing the parking requirements to be more in tune with what the market requirements or the market supply and demand characteristics are, and then concurrent processing. Those are the incentives. So I'll stop there in case anybody has any questions.
I do have a question. Could we go back to that slide? So Kathy, on the incentives, I just want for everybody to be perfectly clear. The first two that I identified, so residential uses in commercial industrial corridors and increased densities, those would not go into effect immediately under our ordinance, correct?
Correct.
And what is the estimated timeline for those incentives to be available?
That's for somebody else.
I can start to help answer that question while Scott thinks about it a little bit more. But the staff is preparing at the moment, I'm blanking on the word, proposals, if you will, or scope of work to retain a consultant to begin preparing the rezoning as well as the visioning. I don't know if Scott has additional information that he can provide in terms of the timeline of that.
Yeah, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Harlan, the RFP is expected to be done actually this Friday, the first draft, and it also includes the objective design standards as well, which is a good complementary component for that.
Okay, so then my follow-up is, provided that gets done, and I'll just throw out an estimated timeline of 12 to 18 months, will we still be required to do a general plan update in order to implement that zoning code?
Yes.
Okay, so that's another separate project.
The rezoning would be part of the general plan as well.
Okay, so the RFP is for a general plan update?
And zoning, yeah.
Okay.
For the corridors.
Okay. So based on my experience, that's going to be a couple of years before we actually get any incentive placed under this program.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I need. Thanks.
Okay. Next slide.
Anybody else? We're good? Okay, please continue.
So fundamentally, the in lieu fee analysis is based on the evaluation that we did, so the financial evaluation that you've all seen, that developed the recommended percentages of affordable housing units to be required. So using the most common one was the 60 units or greater project, rental project. The recommended percentage was 11% low or 7% very low income. But we ran it for everything. We ran it for all the various scenarios that have been considered. But fundamentally, the in lieu fee is based on the impact created by the affordable unit requirement being proposed. And so to the extent that the affordable unit requirement is less, the fee would be less. To the extent the affordable requirement is increased, the in lieu fee would be greater. This is a really important concept in that people get really focused on in lieu fee. And it's really important to understand that it correlates to the affordability gap associated with producing the affordable units. You can, at your own discretion, allow for a discounted in lieu fee, and that's absolutely fine. You just shouldn't create an in lieu fee that's higher than the affordability gap, although you can, because somebody can always produce the units. This is an option. But generally, in lieu fees are set at either the affordability gap, as evidenced by the financial evaluation that set the recommended levels of affordability, or at a discounted rate for cities that want to see the in lieu fee revenue in order to achieve other goals with those funds. Next slide, please. And next one. So just to run through the assumptions that went into the in lieu fee analysis, we're starting with rental projects. And what we did is we looked at the monthly rents for market rate projects. We did a CoStar search in Costa Mesa to estimate for the prototypes that we analyzed in the financial evaluation. And those rents ranged from $2,410 for studio units up to $3,330 for the 3-bedroom units. So that becomes the foundation of that part of the analysis. Then the affordable rents are tied to, in the low income case, tied to being calculated at 30% of 80% of the area median income, with 30% of income spent on rent or housing expenses. So as you can see on the table here, those rents range from $1,694 to $2,373. So that creates the gap. So for a 2-bedroom unit, the market rate is $3,660, and the low-income rent is $2,152. So you have a difference of about $1,500. If you do the same thing for the very low-income rents, which are based on area median, 50% of area median income, again with 30% of income spent on housing, then you see that those rents range from $1,023 up to $1,415. And again, so using the 2-bedroom example, you have $3,660 as your monthly market rent and $1,290 as your very low-income rent, which creates about a $2,400 a month affordability gap for those units. Next slide.
Okay. Kathy, on
Yes.
Just it seems counterintuitive, but maybe there's a reason why the 3-bedroom is less than the 2-bedroom.
Oh, that is counterintuitive. Yeah, it was the data, but you're right. That is kind of a weird glitch.
Okay.
Thank you. That is an excellent point.
So the affordability gap, I know that there's some other stuff in one of the slides maybe that you're getting to.
It's the
Slide
next
12, where it talks about property tax and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the next slide.
But it's basically just if you go to slide 11, if you take the number in the monthly rent for the market rate and you subtract the low income or the very low income, there's your affordability gap, not getting down to the fine nuance of the property tax, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Rental's trickier than ownership. Ownership, the affordability gap is the affordable
Let's
price
just stick
minus
with
the
rental.
market.
I'm having enough trouble with rental, so. Go
Ownership's
ahead,
easier.
I get it. That's called the affordability gap.
Correct.
Okay. All right, got it.
Any more questions while we're on the site? Yes.
Yeah, so in the affordable rents table, is the low income, is that 60 or 80%?
It's 80.
That's the 80, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is kind of a question I had from, I think I can talk. Before, what's the market for low-income, very low-income rents? What's the market? What's the number of people?
Well, I think Cecilia dealt with that in her slides.
She did, but I didn't hear a number.
Yeah.
Like, how many would you build in Costa Mesa where you've got enough?
All right.
The state says 4,000, right?
So in the very low and extremely low income housing category, that accounts for approximately 29% of the city's households. And within the extremely low, very low, and low category, that accounts for approximately 40% of the Costa Mesa households.
40% of rentals or households or dwellings? So you're saying that we have 40,000 dwellings in Costa Mesa. So you're saying 79% are low or very low income? Or sorry, 69%. 29 and 40, am I doing that right?
29% of the community are in the income category where they would qualify for very low or extremely low income housing.
Okay. And
then if we add the low income community to that number, that brings up the percentage, or to that grouping, that brings up the percentage to 47% of the Costa Mesa community in the extremely low, very low, and low income category.
so if I've got 40,000 dwelling units, that means 47% times 40,000 is 18,800. That answers my question. Okay, so to satisfy what you think the need is, even those people are currently renting, you've created two markets, haven't you? So what happens is, so if you build all those, what happens to those rents? Where they're renting now, I guess they go down? I'm just curious, it's interesting, to me it's confusing in my head, it's a market, right? And if you satisfy a market, it changes the market rates, everything changes, right?
Theoretically, if you build enough supply, you will get downward pressure in rents. If that's your point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud.
No, I understand, but I mean, I think if I understand your question.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get a handle on when you say we need more affordable units and we're going to build 6%, 15%, whatever, and Santa Ana has built 10 or whatever, it's pretty hard to get to 18,000.
That's correct. And inclusionary can only ever be considered to fulfill a small amount of your affordable housing need.
There are no restrictions on who can rent these. They don't have to be a Costa Mesa resident, do they?
No, you can create some sort of limited preferences, but you can't specifically eliminate
Discriminate.
Right.
What's a limited preference, for instance?
I'm going to let Kim answer that
Okay,
question.
great. I hope these questions are okay.
They're good.
Yeah, you can have some limited preferences. Typically, we would perhaps advertise first or require someone to advertise first to existing residents or employees of the city, that type of thing. We're not allowed to limit it to current residents only.
Yeah, a guy from Oklahoma walks in, you can't say, oh, you're not from Costa Mesa.
No.
Nothing wrong with people from Oklahoma.
Councilmember Harper, the program 2A does include the consideration of the applicability of establishing a local preference policy, actually. So the inclusionary housing ordinance policy that's in the housing element does include considering that.
What's that mean?
It means exactly what we just spoke about, considering hiring or hiring the level of the, well, I should say, encouraging employees and residents to have the availability of this inclusionary housing over maybe people not in the city. But again, saying that out loud.
What's that mean?
Yeah.
I keep going the same question, I keep asking the same question.
Encourages owners and employees
Councilmember Harper, if I can
people outside the city.
help chime in.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. So as drafted in the ordinance, there's section 13-338. I don't assume you have it in front of you, but it authorizes the city manager to adopt administrative regulations rules or regulations that would be necessary to implement the requirements, which include but not limited to eligibility requirements and or preference standards that may be applied in selection of home buyers and tenants. So we have something in an ordinance to.
No, I didn't understand that, right?
I know it's the same answer with the different words.
Different words.
Let me try it a different way.
Yeah.
Very good.
It still won't answer it because you can't specifically say, Mr. or Mrs. Oklahoman, you can't live in one of our apartments. However, I have worked on projects where, for example, you have a lottery for the first time in a large apartment project that they're being rented out, and folks who live and or work in the city get more ping pong balls in the lottery. So again, Mr. and Mrs. Oklahoma could win, but it's sort of like the NBA draft.
Or like I can discriminate with ping pong balls. That's a really great idea. You could do that. All right, that's the best answer. I understand that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
So like, for example, let's say hypothetically, somebody was coming in from Davis Law School, and they wanted to move into the great city of Costa Mesa. Someday maybe they'd be the mayor.
For example,
They should be allowed to do that, right? Right? We shouldn't
they should have an opportunity.
We shouldn't discriminate against such a person.
And clearly, the most straightforward thing is to not discriminate on any possible level.
Right.
Live or work. Most jurisdictions I work in really want to.
Yeah.
And so you try to create something that stays in the four corners of the law so you don't get a fair housing
Sure.
lawsuit, but you try to do what you can to facilitate. And as Scott said, you focus your advertising in the community, et cetera.
So
Well, it's fascinating policy in the sense that, generally speaking, we believe in the United States of America for mobility between states and mobility between counties and cities. And so we don't generally have those restrictions. So I don't know, when you have those restrictions, even assuming that a policymaker would want to do that, I think it'd be pretty tricky to implement it.
I never recommend it personally.
So can I just follow up on Councilmember Harper's question real quick? I think when we get hung up on this nomenclature is where we talk about your slide, which says 47% and so forth and so on, and it talks about extremely low, and I think he asked a reasonable question. Well, how many do we need to build? But now what we're talking about here in terms of in this ordinance is our objective is to create these deed restricted units, these new units that are deed restricted for low and very low. But we have a housing stock already, right? So we're not saying, we're not, our objective here is not to tear down our housing stock and rebuild 18,000 deed restricted units. Can we all agree to that?
Sure.
Okay, I mean, that's because it would be absurd to try to do that. So the idea is, I think that, in terms of the deed restricted units that we're doing, no matter what we do, they're always going to be a relatively small percentage of the units created, assuming that people do want to build here. And we're going to have the market housing is going to have to create this affordability, small A, not deed restricted affordability, by increasing the supply. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sir, you had something else.
I have one more ping pong ball.
Okay.
Of those 18,800 units for the low income and very low income people that live in Costa Mesa, do we have data on what their rents currently are and how they compare to the rents that you've identified?
I think the way that would work, and this is a housing element question.
Tough
so
question.
I know
No,
just,
it's existing market. I
no,
don't know how
understand,
you
but I
know
understand, but the
that.
housing element has that data. That's what I'm saying. The housing element has the data because it has the data on how much folks are overpaying.
Yeah, you understand the reason for my question is I'm looking at you guys defining what the rents are going to be, and I'm saying, well, what's the other 18,800 rent structure look like? Because you're competing with that market, and you're going to change that market at some level. I don't think you're going to build a lot of these, frankly, but I'm just curious about it.
Right. And I didn't work on the housing element, so I'm going to step out of that one.
Well, where's
can look that
where's that lady that used to work here? I forget her name. I'm kidding. Jennifer Lee. I'm teasing. Sorry. She'd know.
So just a quick thing about technology. I just got a text that said that the people who are online cannot see the slides. Is that true? I mean, is that something we can fix, or is that something that we can fix that? Okay. All right. Please continue, unless there are other questions.
Next slide.
Sure.
Okay, so this is what the mayor was discussing about where the property taxes come in. So I'm just going to spend a minute on this, mainly to show you that it is complicated. It's hard. It is harder than ownership. So basically, you subtract the affordable rent from the market rent, and that is effectively your affordability gap. Then you look at the fact that a prudent developer would then contend that their value of their project is less than if it would be if they could rent all the units at market rent. And so that's where this property tax differential comes in terms of the value that's reduced as a result of having these affordable units. That difference represents the annual affordability gap. So again, now you're looking at that, it's annually basically for a 55-year term. So you have to capitalize it at a rate to come up with what one-time capital cost is of the affordability gap. And that's by what we do then is we look at the returns that were derived from the pro forma analysis when we did the financial evaluation. So, next slide, please. Okay, so based on all of that, you'll see that the difference in the affordability gaps are very similar between the 60-plus units per acre and less than 60 units per acre scenarios. So I'm just going to say one of them. The affordability gap per low-income unit is approximately $221,000. So for every low-income unit you provide in a project, it's costing that project $221,000 per affordable unit. Each affordable unit has that affordability gap effectively at low income.
So the difference in rents times what?
It's the difference in, effectively, it's the difference in rents capitalized at the stabilized return on investment.
So the difference in rents times months, years?
So the difference in rents times 12 to get an annual affordability gap, and then that's capitalized at a stabilized return.
You say capitalized
I'm dividing. I'm dividing that annual affordability gap by, say, 5.5%.
Oh, some cap rate.
Yes.
You get that?
Yes.
Oh, that I understand. Okay.
Okay, so each affordable unit has a gap, low income has a gap of approximately $221,000.
You turn on your mic, please. Your mic.
Sorry, John.
Yeah.
I was doing you a favor. You didn't have to hear me. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, some of your people want to hear you. That's why
have
that's why they're watching.
With ping pong balls.
With the ping pong balls. I seem to have captured your imagination with the ping pong balls. Okay, and so then the very low income units, so keeping in mind that the very low income units are calculated rents at 50% of area median income versus the low income units that are calculated at 80% of area median income, so the gap is bigger, is $364,000 per affordable unit. Now, what's really important about this, and I think we'll go to the next slide, is that you have the situation where you have either an 11% low-income requirement or a 7% very low-income requirement. So the developer gets to choose which requirement they want to fulfill. So if you look through the analysis, you'll see that there were two different per square foot affordability gaps. This is just translating to the percentage of affordable units. I made the assumption that a developer would choose the lower of the two. And so that's the 2610 for density, 2610 per square foot of leasable area in the entire apartment development. And we have an example coming up where we'll show how that works.
Kathy, I want to make sure I understand.
Sure.
So that affordability gap.
Yes.
Essentially becomes a fee that the developer or a cost the developer is going to incur to build that unit.
If they pay the fee rather than producing. They should be equivalent based on the
And that
analysis.
221,000, is it times some other number, or is it just a one-time?
It's
fee?
divided, it's 220 divided by the average square foot of the units.
Oh, and they're going to pay that on the whole development?
They pay that on the whole development.
Okay. So again,
what you do, so for
yeah,
example, if you had a
gotcha.
10% requirement, which is easier math,
Yeah.
you would have, instead of 221,000, you'd have a $2.2 million fee.
Gotcha.
Right? And then you divide that by the square footage of the project to find out what that is per square foot.
Okay.
It's the same number, though, no matter how you shake it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kathy, I have a question.
Yes.
On slide 13. When I
15?
13.
Oh,
the previous
13.
slide, yeah. When
Go back.
I first heard you, or what I heard was this is sort of the cost, the incremental cost to construct a unit. But I think that's actually, I think I misunderstood that, right? This
Yes,
is actually the sort of the reduced profit opportunity over the 55 years.
Correct.
Because of the deed restricted rental rate.
That is correct.
Okay.
It's the affordability gap.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've all got to put it in our own words to understand.
No, I get it. I totally get it. Okay, so and so then the project with the density at 60 units per acre or less, because that requirement is so much lower at 6% low or 4% very low, as you can see, that fee is $1,380, so it's a little more, it's about half. So here are the examples. So the first one is looking at the 60-plus units per acre scenario. And I did it two ways. I did it based on what was voted on at the last meeting, which was 11% low or 7% very low income. And then I did it again based on a concept that has been mentioned both by the Planning Commission and by other members of the City Council at 10% low or 5% very low for illustrative purposes. So looking at this project, it's a 23-unit project where 11% of the units would have to be low income. And again, that's because 11% at low income is less expensive to the project than 7% at very low income. That's why that one was selected. So the required number of low-income units would be 3 units. The project is 17,000 square feet of total leasable area. And so what you would multiply is 17,000 square feet times the in lieu fee that is $26.10. So it's just 17,000 times 26.10. And the result is an in lieu fee payment of $443,700. Questions? Seeing none. So then doing it again, based on the requirement that it either be 10% low or 5% very low income using the same project. So then it's, in that case, the very low income fee per square foot is actually lower than the low income fee as it works out. And so I use that. And so it's a 5% very low income requirement. There's a requirement for 1 low income unit. Again, the leasable area is 17,000 square feet. In that instance, the in lieu fee per square foot of leasable area, which again, I did all the same calculations that I'd done on the other one to get to the fee using the affordability gap, was $19.50 a square foot. And it's less because the requirement is less. And that brings the total in lieu fee to $331,500. Questions? Okay.
When is the in lieu fee due?
That's up to you. Typically, I've seen it done a number of ways. Sometimes it's due when you have building permit issued. If it's a phased project, sometimes cities allow it to be phased in with the phasing of the project. Sometimes some is due at building permit and some is due at end of construction. So there is a number of different ways to do it.
So if this is affordability gap is determined by the lost rent, you know, the reduced rent over 55 years, does this in lieu fee, you know, discount that back to present value?
Effectively, that's what the capitalization rate was for.
Where's the capitalization
That
rate?
was when, again, when you came up with the $220,000 per unit, right, as that affordability gap. Oh, I have to step back. When you come back to the rent difference, remember the $2,600 versus $1,200?
Yeah.
So that was the $1,400 times 12.
Got it.
Divided by the capitalization rate, which is the stabilized return on investment that came out of the financial evaluation.
Who determines the discount rate?
Well, I did in the financial evaluation. And if you look back, if we go back to the financial evaluation,
No, but
what I did, well, so I mean, that's how this in lieu fee, recommended in lieu fee was calculated.
Where is that capitalization rate in your slides? I didn't remember.
It's not in the slide.
that's like,
Oh,
It's not in the
good
slide.
question, John. I'm trying to ask where, I'm being, and he's not an accountant, I am, but it's a good question, but who determines what that cap rate is going forward? Or is it just set now and then that's it for?
Okay, so what my recommendation is you set the fee now based on the information that you have, and then every year you adjust that fee either up or down based on the change in the new home prices, so newly developed home prices in Orange County. The reason for that is because it's a readily available data source, and then so that way your fee pace is either up or down each year. And if you look at Huntington Beach over the years, because they've been doing this for a very long time, you'll see that some years their fee went up, some years their fee went down. Then the suggestion is every 5 years or at some interval that you decide as a council you want to do, you do the analysis
But
again.
how do you pragmatic, I mean, in nuts and bolts, how do you get to the discount rate? I mean, how'd you come up with the 5% and when does it go to 7% or 6% or 8%? You said some words, but I didn't understand what that meant.
Well,
If I had to calculate it, I couldn't do it for you because I didn't follow what, I mean, you
Understood.
said, how's the housing market? I understand the housing market, but I don't understand how that connects.
Okay, so what I did was when I did the financial evaluation of the whole program, when we set the
Right.
percentages, I ran a 100% market rate project with no restrictions. I ran pro forma analysis of a 100% market rate project and backed into then through the cost of the estimated cost of the project, estimated stabilized net operating income of the project, net operating income divided by the cost is the cap rate.
But you had to assume a return that they wanted, which is, that always
No,
tells
I
me.
solved for the return.
You solved for the return. Okay.
Why not just use an index?
You could.
Yeah, that's
What index would you use?
See, I personally think, because every market is different, you look at what the rates of return being generated in different markets are, as opposed to, but there are published cap rate indexes that you could use, like Smith and Company does one. I mean, there are availability. The financial evaluation, keep in mind, that whole financial evaluation needed to be done in order to come up with the recommended requirement. And so you need, and since the returns would vary, then you need to know when your specific community, at the point in time when you're doing the analysis, what that return is.
So when you said you solved for the return, you were saying that the market out there, developer market, in your analysis says, we're building houses and we're okay with a 5% return.
And if I just threw 5% out, that wasn't the actual number.
No, well, right, but you solved for that number, saying that's what
Yes.
developers are building for, and that's therefore what builders will build.
Right,
build
and so
for
in
the
a
future.
community, yeah, and so it's important to understand too, though, that in communities where we're not seeing building, I'll give you an example. When I did Long Beach, when I did the Long Beach Inclusionary Housing Program, there's 2/3 of the city of Long Beach that hasn't seen any residential development through multiple real estate cycles. And so my recommendation to the city was don't impose inclusionary in this area, because we can't say a developer would build because they're not.
Isn't that like Costa Mesa?
Well, now the yes would be the simple answer, but the longer
Well,
answer.
I like the simple answer.
But I have
Why
a
wouldn't we
longer,
stick with
more
that?
accurate. I have a longer, more accurate answer.
Okay.
The whole idea, foundationally, of this proposed program is you're creating a market by rezoning and increasing density. If you don't rezone and increase density, then you've got a whole different situation for inclusionary.
That's right, you are creating a market by creating density, causing the strain on the city and there's other costs, right, that
Correct.
come with that.
Sure.
That's what you're doing. You're redesigning our city through,
I'm
and
not.
sorry, use a general term. The people with the ping pong balls are redesigning our city
I'm the person with the pink.
by creating high density and affordable housing within it. Yeah.
But this data that was created by our staff at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Harlan, that shows that we're like this Long Beach scenario, right? Not a whole lot built, at least recently. We all have the data in front of us.
Right.
Okay.
No, I would be the first to tell you, without the rezoning, this becomes a completely different program.
And the rezoning is going to happen, Mayor Pro Tem established in about 4 years.
I thought he said 2, but maybe he
Well,
said 4.
it's 4 because it's 2 and 2. I didn't hear you say that you're going to do those things concurrently, are you, Scott?
Some of those will be done concurrently.
Oh, okay, then what's your estimate? When do we get it all done?
Mayor Pro Tem was correct, about 2.
2 years for the whole thing? That includes the
Environmental review,
everything and including the, what do you call it?
objective design standards, this is general plan and zoning update.
General plan
For the
amendment?
corridors.
For the corridors?
For the corridors. Yeah, and that's really the areas where the inclusionary housing ordinance is focused on.
All right.
How does the state look?
Hold on.
With,
Sorry,
I apologize.
let's go to Councilmember Manny.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm not sure if it should be casual or formal. It's kind of we're going all over the place. But just for the council's remembrance and for the public's remembrance, is there a reason why we're doing this IHO policy before the rezoning? Because I kind of feel like the rezoning should be the bigger priority. But what's the rationale from staff's end that we're doing
Can I
it in
be
this order?
staff first? I think it's really important that at sort of worst-case scenario, you do it concurrently, because if you rezone first, then you've created all this value. And so then at that point, when you've created the value, then you're taking something away when you impose an affordability restriction. I'm a big fan of doing it together. So if you've created $10 of additional value and you're taking $4 of it back, they're still getting $6. But if you create $10 and then come in and do an inclusionary housing policy, then you're taking away $10.
Got it.
If I could add to that also, the time that it takes to do the environmental and all of the other zoning work is significantly longer, although we've been at this particular ordinance and so on for a while. It's better to, since as far as we've come, to get it done and then then move on to the zoning.
Cool. Thanks.
Under our, sorry, Jeff, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit on this hypothetical and talk about what this project would actually look like. So it's 23 units at a 60 DU to the acre density. My math is that's about a 17,000 square foot lot. So what is
This was your example.
what is the form and shape of that project to accommodate 23 units?
It's a tight project, clearly. There are a few in the city that are like that in the older parts of towns, where possibly some of the development was done in the county. But for sure, there are units that are developed at this density, and this was actually an example of one that I used.
Okay, and so has there been a project that's come through that is this kind of?
Not recently.
Okay.
It's a good question. How many stories is that, hypothetical? Just two stories?
With garage.
Yeah. So, quick question relative to RENA. We collect everybody does an in lieu fee. Nobody builds them. What's the impact? What's the view of the state in that scenario relative to RENA and our requirements? We didn't build any, we've got some money. How does that work?
The inclusionary is only one policy within your overall housing element. So you said you were going to do inclusionary. It was never meant, as I mentioned before, to generate a significant, a large number of your RENA goal that they've set. So the idea is if you get in lieu fee revenue, you then have to use that in lieu fee revenue to assist in an affordable housing project or projects. And so you would ultimately use those funds to create affordable housing. So the short answer is the state is fine with that.
State doesn't care.
They don't care.
They just say as long as the money appears to be creating affordable units through charging developers and taking their money and then recycling it in some way to create. How's that in lieu money going to create affordable housing?
So it can be direct assistance to the developers of a project, say a 100% affordable housing project, that then is getting various forms of state and regional
Gosh, I'm going to
assistance.
sound sarcastic. So I'm going to take money from developer A and I'll give it to developer B to build the housing I want.
Yeah.
Okay. That didn't mean to sound sarcastic. That seems.
The reason it makes sense, so some cities do really focus on in lieu fee, is because if you do a 100% affordable housing project, there are all kinds of leveraging sources, the state and low-income housing tax credits, the county, and those, so that the assistance per unit can actually be, the local assistance per unit can actually be far less than when you're doing it in a market rate project because of those leveraging sources. So really, I mean, the reason you do inclusionary, just this is going to be a policy issue, is to spread the affordable all over town. The reason you do 100% affordable is because you can get deeper affordability in one location for less money. So it's two different policy objectives.
Gotcha. All right.
Councilmember Harper, if you don't mind, I'd like to give an example if you're interested.
Oh, I don't think it's okay with them. I don't want to take all of it.
Okay, no problem. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'll catch you later, unless they want to, if
give
they
an
want to hear it.
example.
Yeah, go ahead.
For instance, at the jurisdiction that I worked previously, a subdivision got approved, Irvine Company subdivision, and they paid in lieu housing fees. Those in lieu housing fees were turned around and provided to Jamboree Housing. Jamboree Housing built affordable housing with that. So it was a project-related use of those in lieu fees, and it worked out perfectly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's proceed.
Next slide, please. So now the next example is using the project at 60 units per acre or less. And that project was 240 units. It has a 6% low income requirement, again, because that was the less expensive of the two options. With a 240 unit project, it would have 14 low income units. The leasable area of the project is 220,000 square feet. The recommended in lieu fee is $13.80 per square foot of leasable area, which generates an in lieu fee payment of approximately $3 million. Okay. If there are no questions, next slide, please. Nancy? Okay, so, and there was actually a comment that came in a letter today about why we were doing, and actually a comment during oral comments, about why we were recommending a discounted fee for smaller projects. Smaller projects get hit disproportionately by an affordable housing requirement, because if you're providing one unit in a small project, it's significantly more costly to that overall project. The reason this is 15 to 20 units is 20 units is a pretty good threshold, a pretty common threshold for saying that's a project, anything above that size, you start getting to not having that disproportionate impact due to rounding, et cetera. And so because the threshold in the first reading was 15 units, it becomes a discounted fee for 15 to 20 units, with anything above 20 units paying the full fee per square foot. At various points in this process and in various different communities, as was mentioned, some cities set the threshold project size at 5 units. I mean, some cities set it at 1. Some cities set it at 5. Some cities set it at 10. This fee schedule would change proportionately depending on where your threshold is set. So in this case, given that 15 units is the threshold for projects to be subject to the ordinance, that's where it starts.
So let me ask you a question. This is a question from us, from the public.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to read it. Okay. I can't write it any better. Can staff or KMA please explain why the fee is stepped up only between 15 and 20 units, given that only developments under 50 units are permitted to pay in lieu fees based on the city council recommendation? It seems odd that the fee per square foot of leasable space would be the same for a 21 unit building as it would for a 49 unit building. And then they have a commentary about what they would personally like to do. I'll just read it. I would personally like to consider stepping up the fee more gradually, perhaps in increments of 5 or 10. Right. So what was the, I think that that's an excellent question. I didn't understand why we would do it this way.
Because the whole notion is you don't have to discount the fee at all. So you could just charge the full in lieu fee for the smaller project sizes. So then it just becomes an idea of, so once you have, if you have an 11% requirement, a 20 unit project will generate 2 units, right, as that obligation. And so you can, for example, Huntington Beach set theirs, they have a discounted fee from 3 to 30. Somewhat arbitrary, but that's, and most of these are somewhat arbitrary. So if you don't think 20 is a reasonable cutoff to where it stops being a disproportionate impact, you could cycle it up to whatever, to 50 if you felt like it. I mean, you could absolutely take the fee and proportionally change it really in any way that you see fit, because then again, people are getting a discount, so you're not overcharging them.
Yeah, you know what, you keep saying that, and I'm going to push back on you a little bit. I think it's like when somebody marks up a dress or whatever, and then they say, well, it's a 50% off, and so we're giving you a 50% discount, you know, and I'm always dubious when that happens. And I think it seems like what we're doing here. So let me ask a few factual questions to illustrate that. You heard what the Adam from the BIA said about Tustin. So let's just focus on, you're familiar with Tustin? Did you do
I
work?
didn't know his numbers.
Did you do work in Tustin?
I've not worked on their inclusion. I've worked on other things in Tustin.
Okay. Do you know whether any developer in Tustin has paid a $26.10 in lieu fee?
As I understand it in Tustin, at least the projects I've worked on, and again, they don't have an inclusionary housing program per se.
The first, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a lawyer here. Do you know whether any developer in Tustin has paid a $26.10?
I'm going to say no.
Okay, good. Do you know whether any, you're familiar with Santa Ana?
Yes, I am.
Do you know whether any developer in Santa Ana has paid a $26.10 in lieu fee?
Okay, can I just say one thing first before I answer that question? It's a production-based requirement. So people are developing, and so if they develop the units, they're not paying them at all. But now the answer to Santa Ana is obviously not, because the fee's $15.
Right. So the answer would be yes, you know.
The answer is
yes, you know, and no, they haven't.
That is
Right.
correct.
But you heard Mr. O'Brien talk about the project on Bloom. You're familiar with the project on whatever it is, Sunflower and Flower?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? And he said that he paid $5
Correct.
per square feet, generated $1 million in lieu fees.
Correct.
Right. Are you aware of any projects over 200 units since 2009 that have been built in Santa Ana that have paid $15?
No, they haven't.
Okay. And none of them have paid $26. So
No,
do you have any reason to believe that any developer in Costa Mesa would actually pay a $26.10 in lieu fee?
Yes.
Okay, what's your basis for that?
My basis for that is you're creating incentives for development that aren't available in Tustin and Santa Ana. You're creating higher density and the ability to build residential where it's not currently allowed. So you, by your actions as a city, are enhancing the value of the property for residential development.
Do they not have those? Do they not have those incentives in Santa Ana?
They do not.
Okay, so what's their what do you call it? Density requirement in Santa Ana?
It varies all over town. I mean, there's high density areas in South Coast Metro. There are lower density areas closer to the downtown.
But I think what I hear you saying is, you know, through the work that Scott is talking about, that's going to happen over some number of years, whatever it is, we don't know how many, but 2, 3, whatever, we're going to create a density per acre that is going to be much higher than Santa Ana. And for that, you think we can fetch a $26.10 in lieu fees?
I don't think we can say that it's going to be a density that's higher than Santa Ana. I don't know what Santa Ana's densities are.
Right, but I mean, you understand the reason I'm asking this question is somebody comes in and they decide that they're deciding where to build.
Correct.
Okay, and quite frankly, their decisions aren't just limited to Santa Ana or Costa Mesa, or even Orange County. They could build in Rome, Italy, or they can build in, Morocco. They can build anywhere in the world, right?
Sure.
And so, my concern is, and I'm going to put it out there as a policy concern, is that we are going to create a situation after we've worked so hard to open up development through Measure K, that and perhaps with the work that's going to be done in the future with the zoning, then we're going to put this on it, and it's going to ruin the whole project because it's going to be, because we're going to be out of step with other places that investment capital can go in the United States, in California, and in the world.
Okay, so then what you are saying effectively is that you want to have lower percentages.
I haven't said, but I'm just,
Well, I mean,
I'm
that's
asking you I'm telling you a concern, I'm asking you the question to give you an opportunity to address that and respond to a concern that I have.
Sure.
That we're going to make our city substantially less competitive as compared to other cities, other counties, other states, other countries for investment dollars.
And what I would say back to that is, that's the whole notion of inclusionary in general. I don't want to fixate on the fee because it's a production requirement. If you were to lower the fee, you should also lower the production requirement, which is fine. You can absolutely do that, but they go together.
Well,
And
they don't have to go together because you said there can be a discount.
They can't, but I mean, then if you create such a discount in the fee, then you're just asking everyone to pay the fee, which is also okay.
Right.
But that's fine.
Because in Santa Ana, isn't it true that there have been more, substantially more affordable, deed-restricted affordable housing units constructed through affordable housing developments, 100% affordable developments, as opposed to creating them on-site through an in-lieu, sorry, not an in-lieu, inclusionary requirement on-site?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, and do you know what the ratio is?
It's heavily weighted towards the 100%. I don't know the actual ratio, but it's heavily weighted
Heavily
towards
weighted to the 100%.
Yes.
So that would argue for getting in lieu fees in and then using them for gap funding and whatever to help generate 100% affordable projects.
It's financially way more efficient.
Thank you.
But you're making the policy decision that you're going to concentrate your affordable housing in specific locations rather than spreading them through town.
Right.
No, it's absolutely appropriate.
And why wouldn't we want to do that?
That's not my decision.
Well,
I
why-
personally, I mean, as a financial consultant, it would absolutely be my recommendation because it's so much more financially efficient to do a 100% affordable project with the
Right.
outside leveraging. But there are other societal norms and sociological issues that cities want to spread units throughout town rather than putting all the affordable units in an area.
Okay, I want to make sure we get through this, so.
And Mayor, if you don't mind,
Yes.
one other last note. Towards the end of this presentation, there's going to be approximately 4 examples of Huntington Beach where they've had success providing affordabilities projects, including generally along their major corridors, Beach Boulevard. So there is a nearby example that shows this system of affordability and housing creation works. So just to be clear, that's coming.
Yeah, and Mayor, I'll just add that from an administrative standpoint, so Santa Ana is a very large city. And so they have a very robust housing authority. They have the staff, they have the means to be able to take in a good amount of in lieu fees, manage the housing trust fund, and RFP on a regular basis for 100% affordable housing units and specific projects that are all affordable. That's certainly an option to be considered. I think given our size and scope, I would think that a strong consideration for council is, do you want the concentration model, or do you want the model where these units are throughout the city? And for, most everybody, you wouldn't even know there are affordable units in there. They're very well and nicely blended in. The community is far more integrated in that sense. Yes, that's the example that we had in Huntington when I was there for the 9 years that I was there. There are 2,000, 3,000 units spread all throughout the city. As you drive throughout the city, you have no idea. This is affordable. This is market rate. It all looks very well done. It's beautiful. It's market. People believe it to be market rate, but there are many families that are in there that are very low or low income that are actually benefiting from those projects. And it's spread throughout the entire city. And it's done through, our regular processes and all of the work that's being done by the development department. And you don't need to stage up an entire housing authority within the city staffing to be able to do that. It can be done either way, but for cities our size, it's much more the example to go with. It's throughout the entire development. And developers will build it in that case. And it's much easier, but they can opt to do the in lieu fee if they so choose. So
Thank you.
that's one reason to not do that.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so I had a question also on this sliding scale slide. Say that 10 times fast. And I was a little perplexed by the granularity. Each unit seems to have a different in lieu fee. My question is this, though. Kathy, are you familiar with the table that staff has prepared, all of the development and entitlement?
Right.
So my review of this, and I'll talk about it more in detail later, virtually none of the projects that have been built in the last, or entitled in the last 6+ years, fit into these categories. So what would suggest that we're going to get projects of this size?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Right.
Okay. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, so now we're on the ownership side, and as I've mentioned multiple times, any ownership project can pay the in lieu fee. And the reason for that, and you can see it in these two tables, is the difference between the sales prices for market rate units versus the moderate income price. And as you can see, the moderate income price stays pretty stable between 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. And the reason for that isn't the income changes at each of those levels, but the cost of ownership goes up for particularly the utility allowances, they go up. And so you don't see that much of a difference in the affordable price. So if you go to the 4 bedroom unit type, we had, in our survey, we came up with a $1.2 million market rate price versus a $478,000 moderate income price. And so what that means is the affordability gap is 1.2 million divided by approximately 500,000, so a little more than $700,000. So the affordability gap is, more than what an affordable buyer can pay to buy the unit. So you have a unit that has effectively been 2/3 of the price been subsidized to create the affordability. As we discussed when we did the financial evaluation, I think professionally that gap is so large as to be creating lottery winners when they buy those units. So somebody, you get one family who gets a $1.2 million house instead of getting what is effectively a $700,000 in lieu fee per affordable unit. And so then that again can be more efficiently deployed to rental projects. So that was the rationale behind ownership being in lieu fee based. Having said that, if a developer wants to build affordable ownership units in the inclusionary program, they can. Okay, next.
What's the square footage on the 4 bedroom that you assumed?
I can pull it up on my computer. Should we keep talking while I do that? Or no? We can wait.
Yeah, let's move, can you get somebody else to pull that information up, and then you can keep talking if you're the one that.
I can keep talking while I'm doing it. Okay, just because it'll take a while for my computer to turn on. Okay, so let's just move on, and then I will get there. Okay, so as you can see, the affordability gap, conveniently, shows is $732,000 for the 4 bedroom, $631,000 for the 3 bedroom, and $477,000 for the 2 bedroom. Okay, next slide. So the weighted average affordability gaps were then converted. So if you looked at those 3 bedroom types, if you go back to that slide before, the gaps between 477,000 and 732,000, the weighted average affordability gap is, next slide please, $608,000. And, hold on. And that becomes, per square foot of saleable area, that becomes $17.70 per square foot, which leads us to the question I was just asked. Talk among yourselves. Okay, the 2 bedroom units are 1,560 square feet. Let me make sure I'm doing the right one. Here, wait, hold on, let me make sure I'm doing the right one. Let's see, sorry. Okay. Okay, I was right. 2 bedroom units are 1,560 square feet. 3 bedroom units are 1,610 square feet, and the 4 bedroom units are 1,760 square feet. 1,560. And the average unit size is 1621. The weighted average unit size is 1621. Okay. I'll just leave this on for future use. Okay, next slide, please. So again, using the same methodology of discounting the fee between 15 and 20 units, it's just linear. It's just a linear. So if you end at 1770 and you do the math linearly, it's 253 for 15, and then up per unit. And back to a question that Jeff asked, you can absolutely do it in groups of 5. For a while, Huntington Beach was doing it that way. You can do it in groups of 10. So you can establish how you want to parse those out. This has become kind of a common way to do it just because the math is easier. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now there are 2 ownership housing development sample and lieu fee calculations. So one is a small project and one is a not as small project. So the reason for that is the 16-unit project would be subject to the discounted in lieu fee, whereas the 30-unit project would be paying the full $17.70. To make a consistent comparison, I used the same square footage of the units in each example, okay? And so the saleable square feet in the 16-unit project is 38,900, and the square footage in the 30-unit project is 73,000. The difference, the reason it's not a linear comparison, is again because of the discounted in lieu fee for the 16-unit project. That fee is only $5.06 a square foot. So that project generates a required in lieu fee, which is just $38,900 times $5.06 of $196,700. The 30-unit project doing the same thing, but having a $17.70 per square foot in lieu fee generates approximately $1.3 million in lieu fee. Questions? Okay, moving on. Okay, this is like a left turn. So now we're going to talk about density bonus for a moment. This really does play into inclusionary housing programs generally because density bonus does provide an ability and incentives that mitigate the impact of affordable housing costs being imposed on projects. So what I'm going to focus on at the beginning of this is just what the state density bonus currently lets you do. And just as a point for everybody to keep in mind is the legislature changes the density bonus every year. But these general tenets apply and have applied for many years. And that is the benefits created by the state density bonus are that you get a prescribed percentage of increased density excuse me, above general plan land use element standards or specific plan standards or whatever standards create the highest base density. That's a relatively recent change in the state density bonus. It provides, depending on the level and the percentage of affordable units that are provided, it provides a statutorily defined number of concessions or incentives. It's unclear to me why they say concessions or incentives since they're basically both the same thing. And that's based on to assist in reducing the cost of affordable housing. The next one, which is development standards reductions or waivers, those are tied to the physical requirements of a project. So the first one is more of a cost issue. The second one is you're required by the density bonus, you, the city, are required to make it possible to physically develop the number of units allowed by the density bonus. This was instituted primarily, and this was instituted at least a decade ago, because a number of cities had general plan and zoning requirements that with their development standards, you couldn't actually develop the base zoning that was allowed by the code. And so what the legislature said was, well, that's great, but if somebody's gonna use density bonus, you've gotta get them to the number of units allowed by the statute. And the burden is on the city to prove that they don't need it. in both cases. And so that's a little density bonus discussion. Now, if a developer uses the state density bonus, and if the income and affordability restrictions imposed on that to meet the density bonus standards are at least as stringent as the city's inclusionary housing requirements, then you have to count the affordable units being used for the density bonus and the inclusionary. So in other words, you can't say you owe me 11 inclusionary units plus you owe me 15 density bonus units, you owe me 26 units. And I have an example on the next page. So then the idea then is also the city's idea, and we've discussed this before, is in creating the proposed rezoning and creating incentives related to parking, et cetera, is that, and by allowing the low-income units to have their rent calculated based on 80% of area median income, rather than the density bonus, which is calculated on 60% of area median, those incentives, you're not trying to stop people from using the state density bonus. This is just another way to fulfill the inclusionary housing requirement with some more incentives that we've been discussing throughout this process. So the next slide hopefully will make this all clearer. Okay, so using a 100-unit project and assuming that it's at 60 or more units per acre, is the city's affordable requirement is either 11% low-income units rented at 80% of area median income, or 7% very low-income units rented at 50% of area median income. So it's in my 100-unit project, it's either 11 low-income units or 7 very low-income units. Now, if a developer wants to maximize the state density bonus and get a 50% density bonus, the way the statute is currently written is the units would have to be, the affordable units would have to be either 24% low-income units calculated at 60% of area median income, or 15% very low-income units calculated at 50% of area median income. For those of you doing math in your head, the 15% at 50% is a lot better financially than the 24% at 60%. But I've seen some projects where the low-income state density bonus has been used, but more commonly developers choose to use the very low-income standard. And just as another point of reference, if a developer does 5% very low-income units, they can get a 20% density bonus. If they do 10% low-income units, again at 60% of AMI, they can get a 20% density bonus. So that's the minimum. So a developer could choose not to maximize the density bonus. But for this example, I maximize the density bonus.
So Kathy, in your second scenario with state density bonus, then the total unit count increases 50%.
Correct.
So we're not talking about an apples to apples 100 to 100 unit, it's 100 to 150.
That is correct.
Okay. The other point, I guess a question for you to confirm, is state density bonus law is ministerial approval.
Correct.
So there's no public hearing. So a project comes in using state density bonus, is 150 units, provides 24 units of low-income housing, gets concessions or waivers on height, setbacks, parking, et cetera, and it's just approved.
I would say in 98% of the times.
Okay, just so the public understands what is allowable under state law.
And again, the burden of proof is on the city. And so I used to do a lot of density bonus work. I used to do a lot of density bonus financial analyses. And I really started telling my clients, unless it's egregious, don't pay me to do this, because it's very difficult to say no. And I mean, I've had a couple. That's why I say it's about 98%. I've had a couple where the concessions requests were so absurd.
What do you mean the what burden of proof is on
You have to
the city?
prove that what they're, because they say, for example, that they're entitled to 3 concessions. They're entitled to 3 concessions no matter what. Now they're identifying the 3 concessions they want, right? And Jeff's right, it's parking, setbacks, height, FAR. It's not parking, parking is automatic. Right. So it's FAR, height, and setbacks generally. is what folks ask for. So generally, when that's asked for, unless they've asked for 10 stories, when effectively they could do it, and then the zoning is 4 stories, there's, it's egregious then. But generally, you have to give them 3. So say you decide they didn't need the height concession, you still have to give them a 3rd concession. And this is all back to, if you can't prove that they don't need it, or, if you prove they don't need it, right, I didn't want to use too many negatives. If you prove they don't need it, then you can say, no, you have to ask for different concessions. But generally, in my experience, the concessions that are requested typically fall within a reasonable range.
And the reason the density bonus has not been used widely in Costa Mesa is because our base densities are so low.
Correct.
But when we go up and we do this rezoning that we've talked about over the next few years, our base zoning goes up, and then it's more likely that we're going to see these density bonus projects.
Yes, but we tried to account for that in the discussions, and that's where meeting with the developers came in very handy, was the discussions of when you got, that's how we ended up at this 60 unit plus threshold for areas in the corridors, because the notion is developers right now don't want to build 90 units the acre. They want to build 75 units the acre.
Right.
Right? And so then the other idea too is, if folks use the low income requirement, there's a big difference in rent between 80% of AMI and 60% of AMI.
Understood. So in terms of, one of my questions was, and you just triggered it, with respect specifically to the in lieu fees, have you spoken to developers and gotten their feedback on it? And that goes to whoever in staff. Have we, sat down and talked to, we've got some developers in the audience. Have we called up Tim, called up George, called up the Sagerstroms, called up, who else other might develop, who am I missing out on? Maybe Shaheen Sadeghi, Olson. Have we had those discussions and said, hey, here's what our consultant came up with, what do you think?
If you're speaking specifically, have we discussed the fee with them?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Is that something we're going to do?
This is the first time that we've surfaced the fee issue, so we certainly could do it, but it wasn't something that we were going to do.
I think it'd be a good idea because, they're the most likely ones to do a development project, Something to think about. Also, Rose Equities, make sure to talk to them.
So I have a question. This is more like hypothetical, I guess, but given the state's generosity in terms of allowing them to waive requirements, and given the fact that it'll probably take 2 years before we do any zoning to make it even possible for them to use density bonus waive requirements, why would they ever pay an in lieu fee? Or why would a developer ever opt for an IHO policy if it's more convenient to do a density bonus that we have no control over? Shouldn't our plan then be more attractive than a density bonus so that we have some say in the community through public hearings, so that we're not getting projects that don't have our approval?
Well, I think that was the idea. I think that's why we set the affordable rent higher than the state density bonus, generally, and then the other incentives that have been discussed. But I can't say people won't use state density bonus. They may.
I mean, do you feel what you propose now is substantially more attractive than state density bonus?
I think the 80% rent is definitely more attractive than the state density bonus.
Have you seen that play out in other cities throughout the state?
I have been using, in most of the cities I've been working in the last several years, I've been setting low-income rents based on 80%, just because I think it's stupid that the very low is 50 and low is 60, but the people who can live in the low-income units can earn up to 80. And it just doesn't create enough of a difference. And in those cities, I will tell you, and they don't have the incentive, they don't have the notion of the rezoning, right? So they're just imposing inclusionary, and it's just a reduction in value, right? They're not getting an incentive. is that for rental projects, using state density bonus is very commonly used. And so again, the short answer is state density bonus rather than in lieu fee is very typically more advantageous.
Okay, thank you for elaborating that.
Sure.
Please continue.
Okay, so just so everybody understands this, using the first example, you've got 24 affordable units. Your city requirement is 11 units as proposed. So 11 of those 24 units satisfy your requirement. Those same 24 units satisfy the density bonus requirement. So the total number of affordable units in this 100, in this case 150 unit project, because it got a 50% density bonus, is 24 low-income units. Similarly, if they used the state density bonus and fulfilled the very low-income requirement, then your inclusionary requirement is 7% very low income, so that's 7 units. Density bonus is a 15% requirement, so that's 15 units. So 7 of those 15 fulfill your inclusionary requirement, and 15 of those 15 satisfy the density bonus. Now, what's really important to understand about all of this is that density bonus is calculated off the base zoning. That's why if they get 150 units, it's still being calculated based on a 100-unit project for the affordability.
Before you continue, Lauren, I know you got a hard stop at 7. I want to give you an opportunity. Are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so.
Kathy, I'm sorry, can you repeat just the last thing you said?
Right.
You affirmed that the density bonus is calculated off the base zoning, and then just finish that sentence.
Okay, so again, so you have 100 units of base zoning entitlement. And to get a 50% density bonus, let's use very low income, 15% of those units would have to be very low income units. So you'd have 15 very low income units, and then 85 market rate units, plus 50 more market rate units. So you'd have 135 market rate units and 15 very low income units.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So, recommendations. I think I'm out, right? Or am I doing this? We're at recommendations. I am doing the recommendation. Okay, sorry. Okay, it's a well-oiled machine. Okay. Okay, so based on the analysis that we've just discussed, and based on the inclusionary housing requirements that are being considered, then what we at Kaiser Marston have recommended is that the fees for 60-plus dwelling units per acre rental projects would range from a low of $3.73 per square foot and for 20 units and up to $22.37, and then anything above 20 units would be $26.10 per square foot of leasable area. For under 60 units per acre, that base fee is $13.80 per square foot of leasable area, with the sliding scale discounted fee ranging from $1.97 to $11.83. For ownership projects, as we discussed, it'd be $17.70 per square foot of saleable area, except for projects between 15 and 20 units. And those fees would be ranging from $2.53 to $15.17 per square foot of saleable area. Then, finally, what we're recommending is that you relook at this program at least every 5 years. You can look at it sooner, as one of the commenters who wrote in suggested it should be done sooner. The one caveat I would recommend on that is, as has been discussed, it takes a while for projects to get up out of the ground and operating. So if you do it much sooner than 5 years, you might not be able to tell anything that's happened. But I've worked in cities where we've established this at least 5 years, and then stuff happens, and then they look at it in 3. So, I mean, it's not just because you have established it as at least every 5 years. It could be sooner, based on if you have huge changes in the marketplace, for example. As I mentioned during the presentation, to allow in lieu fees to keep pace with changes in the market between the times when you redo the whole analysis, is to, as I said, it's a readily available data source, is look at the change in the new home price in Orange County, newly developed. And that is a readily available piece of data. And then just change your fee by that percentage, increase or decrease, until you go ahead and change the fee through a whole study. I've had cities, a good example is Santa Monica. They had the same fee for like 20 years. They never adjusted it. And then they went from $13 to like 60. I mean, it was, when they changed it. So that's just a recommendation so you can keep pace. And I said all that. I said everything that's on that slide. So I'm done.
Okay. I have one last question for you, Kathy.
Sure.
So let's assume we adopt all of your recommendations.
Okay.
Okay. And based on everything that you know about Costa Mesa, and you've been here for a while,
A long time.
and you know what our development history is, at least for the last decade. You understand our community's tolerance or lack thereof for development. You also understand there's a definite interest in having some inclusionary program. How many units, total units, would you expect us to have developed in the next 5 years?
Very few.
What is that?
I mean, only because it's going to take 2 years to do the rezoning. So I think in the 2 years it takes to rezone, you're likely to see no units built under the inclusionary housing policy effectively. And then once you've got the rezoning, then it's going to take time for folks to buy land and entitle land, unless people are speculatively buying in hopes that you're really going to do it. Do the zone change. I would posit that was not a great idea. But if they do, so then it takes 2 years to build. So now you're at year 4.
Right. Okay. So what's the number? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it, but
The number of total units?
Total units.
It depends on your development agreement deals, honestly. Because, I mean, you have development agreement deals out there that are going to generate hundreds of units. It could happen in the 5 years.
Well, let's put those aside, the ones that are entitled or already in the pipeline. Let's just say, for anyone who's looking to develop in Costa Mesa, we adopt this program based on your recommendations. Where does the Costa Mesa community see development occur in the city, and how many units?
Can I answer it differently and then try and answer your question? I don't think it's going to change whether you adopt this or don't. I don't think the number of units that get developed. I don't think, see, it is my professional belief that this program is incentive-based. Now, you can agree or disagree with me on that, but so that everybody's a winner in this program. It's a carrot rather than a stick. So I don't think it is a detriment to development to adopt it as proposed. So it's the same whether or not you have inclusionary. It's just now you either get 100% market rate or you get some affordable units in the development.
Right, but, okay, how many units, though?
100.
Okay, all right.
So I have this data. I just want to make sure that it's not faulty, because you know this. You said you know Santa Ana.
Right.
Okay. So the data that I received says this is 200 units or more, and the projects 200 units or more from 2009 through 2023
In Santa Ana.
in Santa Ana. And according to this data, the mean, or let's say average, so people don't think I'm being mean. The average amount that was paid in lieu was $4.85. Does that sound about right to you?
Sure.
Okay. And the median was $5.
Understood.
Okay. And they're now asking for 15,
I don't think anyone's paid 15.
and nobody's paid 15.
I don't believe anybody's paid 15.
Nobody's paid 15. And the highest I have here, the range is $1.94, and the highest, which is the heritage property, phases 1 through 3, paid $9.35.
Okay, I believe you. I don't know that.
I mean, I'm just getting this data. I just
Right, no,
want to,
no, yeah,
I just
don't-
want to make sure that somebody doesn't say, so I've received data from a constituent. I'm just test driving it here so that you don't say I got faulty data.
No.
Okay.
I mean, something important about Santa Ana to understand is they've changed their inclusionary housing policy at least 4 times that I can think of. So it is very difficult to assess. But the $5 fee, it's correct. That was the most used fee and the most prolific time of development in the Santa Ana inclusionary history. The inclusionary program in Santa Ana, when it first started, was only applied to projects that were asking for a change in use or increased density. So it wasn't global. It was, now, over time, they've changed it, usually when the council changes. And so they have changed it. Now it's a $15 fee, and if you do skilled and trained labor, you get a discount in the fee. But so.
Right.
So, yes, over time, you're going to have seen that range that you're discussing. I don't have any doubts that I think your information is probably correct.
So it's funny because I'm thinking about this article that just came out today that said, why did they put the Mercado in Costa Mesa instead of Santa Ana? I don't know if you read that.
I did.
But, so I'm going to ask kind of a question along in that vein, okay? So, and I've asked it again, but I just want to hear it again now that we've established these numbers. Why would a developer be willing to pay 5 times as much in an in lieu fee to develop in Costa Mesa as opposed to Santa Ana?
I think they would be willing, if they're willing, it comes back to if you believe the percentages are right for your inclusionary housing program, because that is the effective cost of producing those units, the effective affordability gap. If you charge less, they'll be happy. And if you charge less, they're less likely to produce on site, which is fine.
But I guess the answer that I'm not hearing
The
you say.
$5 doesn't correlate to anything. It didn't correlate to
I know,
anything. It was
I
just a
know.
made-up number.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be frustrated. It's just, I'm hearing you going back to the math. But what I'm thinking about is something like this, something that I would understand. It's like, an answer could be, well, because at Costa Mesa, you can charge 5 times the rent, right? Or in Costa Mesa, you can build 5 times the number of units. Or in Costa Mesa, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it seems to me like, if you take Santa Ana and you take Costa Mesa, I mean, I've made the argument, and I'll stand by it, that Costa Mesa is the best city in the world, okay? And we could do a whole study session on that. But I can't say that in good conscience that Costa Mesa is 5 times as attractive to a developer than Santa Ana. So so I've asked you the question and you've answered it. Do you have anything to add?
The only thing I have to add, and I did say it, is the $5 was a made-up number.
Well, the $5 wasn't a made-up number. It's the number they actually paid. That's
No,
not
it was
made up.
no, but it was made up with no analysis. The city council just said one day, I think we'll charge $5 now. It had been 15, then they changed it to 5.
And nobody built on 15, and they changed it to 5. People built, they paid the money.
There's a whole explanation the city can give you on many of the mitigating factors that stop people from developing during that period. But
Well, they raised, by the way, and just to get this, with those units, 9 projects raised a total of $23,189,000
Right.
in lieu fees.
which they then used to do 100% affordable projects,
Right.
and it's been very successful.
And it's been very successful.
That's
Okay, so then, I just want to ask one other question. I did the math on One Metro West, and I came up with, they would have to pay, if it was $26.10, almost $30 million on that project. Does that sound about right?
I haven't done the math, I believe you. Your math is probably correct. You just multiplied the leasable area times 2610.
Right. Okay.
But
All
I mean,
right,
I think, okay.
I don't have any further questions. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Everybody make your comments, do whatever you want. Oh, there's more presentation? Oh, my
Mayor,
goodness.
I just want to, one of the things
I
that
thought we were done.
I heard from this discussion in response to your question is that Santa Ana's program has a different sort of design philosophy as well, right? Like they want to collect in lieu funds so that they can run these 100% affordable housing projects. The numbers that Kathy came up with, is based on a program design that we gave through previous study sessions to say we want construction to happen. So that's one of the reasons for the differences. It's not meant to be an apples and oranges comparison.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought we were done.
No, I'm done. There are others.
What else? What else?
Yeah, no, I can be pretty quick with this. So
As Scott mentioned earlier, we did want to highlight an example locally. One of our neighbors, as is mentioned, Huntington Beach, they have had an affordable housing program or form of it since, I believe, the 90s, so I think that's like 30 years now. So this is a screenshot directly from the City of Huntington Beach Affordable Housing website. As you can see, it has about 75 existing affordable housing properties with approximately 3,000 units spread across those 75 housing projects. And a couple of the projects that I just want to quickly highlight include both ownership as well as ownership and rental projects. So Elon, which is located along Beach Boulevard, and actually many of these examples are along their major corridor being Beach Boulevard. As you can see, this one is a total of 274 units, and all of them 100% affordable at low and moderate income. And then there's a residence at Pacific City, also a rental property with 516 total units, and 51 of those at moderate income units. This is Coastal Walk. It's a 45 total unit of ownership, with 4 of those 45 units being available for moderate income. And then another similar ownership housing project, 13 units, a little smaller on this one, but 2 of which are moderate income. And I just want to quickly touch on and just remind the council about the community benefits of adopting an affordable housing program. As you may recall, there is a city council housing goal to diversify, stabilize, and increase the housing to reflect the community needs. Of course, adopting the affordable housing ordinance would help contribute towards the state's RENA numbers. It would also increase affordable housing options for the community, especially the lower income households like our seniors. It would also develop diverse neighborhoods with varying age groups and socioeconomic backgrounds, people from different walks of life, if you will. And it also would help reduce or end the cycle of poverty, eviction, and homelessness in our community. So in conclusion, the recommendations by staff and KMA are data-driven and specifically using Costa Mesa market conditions. The ordinance, as mentioned, similarly as the in lieu fee, the ordinance, if adopted, it can be modified in the future, and the recommendation is to reevaluate the program as frequently as the council determines. And of course, the program and ordinance was crafted using best practices from other local governments with affordable housing programs. Much of the needed affordable housing would be produced along the market rate units under our program. And so just quickly touching on next steps. This is just a study session on the in lieu fee. Following that, staff would bring the second reading as well as the in lieu fee resolution and revised master fee schedule for City Council's potential adoption at the March 19, 2024 City Council meeting. In addition to all that, so if the program is adopted along with the fee resolution, we would then notify HCD of the adoption. So to notify them that we've satisfied program 2A of the housing element. And then jumping right into implementation, we would prepare program guidelines, template agreements, forms, and administrative regulations. And lastly, mid-year budget adjustment for staffing recommendations as we continue to build out and roll out this program, again, if adopted. So staff recommends that the City Council receive the staff presentation and provide your direction on proposed in lieu fee amounts and the subsequent fee resolution for potential future City Council adoption. That concludes the presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your hard work. Parting shots, council.
Yeah, thank you.
Annie.
Thank you, John. Look, I rent. I'm the only person on the council dais that rents. I make $70K a year, so I'm very low income. This policy is designed to support people like myself, right? I look back at why I ran for city council, and the one thing I kept telling myself when I ran for city council was, I'm running for my little sister and our next generation. Well, that little sister is now 15. I'm now working at Save Our Youth, where I work with 400 kids in our school district, ages 12 to 18. And I'm accepted the sad reality that this policy is not meant for me. It's meant for them. Whatever we pass in this policy is going to impact their ability in 5 to 10 years about where they're going to live, where they're going to rent, and things like that. So I'm just going to share a couple things of what I think. I think we have to pass an IHO policy. One, because the state requires it, but two, because it is good policy to have a way for us to evaluate and show people that are affordable, that make below median income, that we care about them. But it has to be done in the right way. I personally think if our IHO policy is not more attractive than the state density bonus, there's no point in doing it. Because quite frankly, state density bonus makes it more efficient to build housing. But the downside of that is that it doesn't give our residents a chance to weigh in and give their opinion on how those properties will look and feel. Those are two important things. But I think our community will be more upset that they don't get a say in the housing project than the amount of affordability in a project. So with that, I only have two goals when it comes to this policy. One, I want to see the most amount of units built, both affordable and actual units. So if that means we need to prioritize a fee to have more units be built in general, and then use that fee to create 100% affordable housing projects in a certain area, I am fine with that. I think it's beneficial to build as much housing as possible because the need is there. I see it every day at work when I have kids telling me that they can't go home from soy until the parents are home because there's another family living next door. The mom's the one them at home by themselves with their family. I see all the time when I have friends who are 24 to 26, 4 in a 200 apartment, trying to make ends meet in Costa Mesa. I think we need units. So I want to see us prioritize the most units built, affordable and market rate. However it is, doesn't matter to me. But I do think a lower fee to capture more in Luffy to build 100% affordable is probably better in the long run. Second, I'm a little uncomfortable with how low the threshold is for this proposed affordable IHO policy. I still think if our number is 15 before the fee kicks in, all we're really doing is asking developers to build 14 units or less. So I want to see us raise that at some point. I also think looking at the numbers, and we've seen them multiple times before, it doesn't make sense to make affordable ownership. The gap is just too big. It doesn't make sense to me to be asking the developer to pay an in-lieu fee for something like that when really the in-lieu fees would be more for rental anyways. And finally, well, two more points. Second and last point, I think when we do pass this policy, we should have a covenant where we look at it between 2 to 3 years. I think every council that gets elected should have a say in how that fee looks. I think it's only fair, and it also gives us a chance to quickly adjust if we don't see entitlements happening or how the units being built. And finally, this is my real point. While I think IHOs are important, I think there's more important things we can do. One member of the public mentioned me to read the Affordable City, which I got from our local library. And having read that book and talked to residents, talked to developers, everyone that wants to meet with me, I spoke with, my conclusion is the best thing we can do to create more units in the long run is an IHO policy. Rather, it's us quickly rezoning, creating the ability for developers to build more units and make it more profitable to build, because if not, they won't ever build. I think we should look where appropriate, where our fees are, and if we need to lower them, but assess that. And more importantly, let's just finally get to looking at parking minimums and lower them and just get it done with. I want to see housing built. I've already accepted the fact, sadly, that I probably will not own in Costa Mesa. And I love this city. I grew up in this city. This is my home, man. I've been here my entire life. My stepdad's a custodian at Ray Elementary School. He's seen all the kids go through that school. My mom's been involved since I was a kid. And I'm looking at this city and being like, we're not building fast enough for me to own here. So I'm okay not getting my piece of Costa Mesa as long as my sister and my kids, sorry, not my kids, the kids that go to Slaver Youth, who I care for, who I run for city council, have a piece of the city. So those are my thoughts. If anyone wants to make a motion or anything, I'm happy to entertain. I just feel the need to say that.
Well, we just have to do receive and file. So did anybody else have parting shots? Don or Jeff or Arliss? Parting shots? Don, you? Yeah, go ahead. You were first at the draw with your light, Don, so go ahead.
My mistake. I think John and Jeff, you had a good question, and it had to do with understanding what the developers' opinions are. And, you know, policy shouldn't be judged by our intentions, but by the outcomes. And I might be the only one that's developed a project up here, or sitting at any of these seats, and I heard 3 developers talk. I would love for you to reach out. It was John or Jeff that suggested it, and give us a matrix of 10, 5 developers, landholders in Costa Mesa, and get their input on this policy. Because I strongly believe if you have a housing crisis and there's not enough housing, I don't see how you fix it by layering on a government program. And that's my concern. You guys did a great job of explaining things even to me, and I understand them in little pieces. I understand generally the concept works. The thing that is incredibly difficult to understand is to project what impact it has on the outcome. It's really hard. I think struggling just to understand the program and then trying to project that into the economics of how that's going to affect developers. So that's why I sort of jump, it was John or Jeff, to what do the developers think? And can we get opinions from them, document them, bring them back to the council? I like ownership in Costa Mesa. That's everybody's dream that builds a great community. We're percentage of renters to ownership. We're on the bottom in Orange County, and I'd like to see that flipped around. The last thing I say, I see what I'm hearing, and again, I think it was some of John's questions and maybe Jeff's, is the number of affordable units are going to be built are insignificant, and it's a lottery for a few people that I can't guarantee even they're going to be Costa Mesa residents. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Anything to add? Arliss?
Yeah, I'll go. Trying to whittle down comments. So housing is really, really expensive because we have like layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of government programs, right? Like no one can just buy land in Costa Mesa and build whatever they want, right? Right? Developers are in the audience. There's lots of different rules you have to go to: submitting applications, going to planning commission, coming to city council, parking requirements, form, aesthetic requirements, right? Like there's lots of government programs that many of our residents support. I see this program as one. My understanding is our menu of programs in the housing element is intended to sort of trade off some of those programs, right? We say we value affordable housing in Costa Mesa. We know the need is there. Almost half of our residents are rent burdened right now, which has a lot of downstream impacts on people's futures in the city, people's current state and their futures in the city. We want to, yes, add a program by adding an affordable housing requirement, but the plan is to trade that off by rolling back some of the other programs. And that was, I think some of those were listed in the incentives, right? Streamlining the application process, increasing density opportunities, pulling back on some of the parking requirements, which I understand to be very expensive. So like the philosophy of this program, I really like. I really like the recommendations the recommendations have been scaled back quite a bit from the original analysis, which is based on Costa Mesa. I remember from the first staff report, I think you met with 30 different stakeholders, maybe half of whom were builders and developers, right? So there's been a lot of input here in addition to this being a Costa Mesa specific analysis. And I think you've done a really good job of answering what or designing a program to respond to what we shared were our values in that first study session. We care about low and very low income. We really wanted to increase that, and we wanted to influence construction, right? I'm concerned about a program that sort of favors in-lieu fees instead of construction, because it's gonna take a long time to build up that pot, and then we still have to figure out how to build those units. I really like the approach to encourage, through the way you've structured the program, the actual construction of low and very low income units. So I think you've set that up well, and that's still where my priorities lie. I think it's important. I think the questions about sort of timing of, this is the cost part of the program, and yeah, we have to partner that with the value part of the program, and I think we're all very eager to get get going on the rezoning piece. And so I think it would be really helpful in future conversations to just have that in context, what other programs we have coming up that will increase that value. I like the way we're approaching this because we're assuming we pass an affordable housing requirement. We're really kind of anchoring, saying we want low, very low income housing built in the city. And then now our next step is, and we've set those numbers, right? And then our next step is, now we've got to figure out what other programs we're changing, right? What other of those layers we're pulling back to create the value to make this feasible. So I think the philosophy makes sense. I think you've designed in a way that answers what we've said we want you to do. I'm supportive of the recommendations as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's okay. First of all, thank you, staff. Thank you, Kathy. I apologize if these were uncomfortable or direct questions, but I think it's vital that we ask them and try and get as much information as possible. I was planning on just limiting my comments to the in lieu fee because that was the topic, but it seems like we've ventured into broader ground here. So I respectfully have a different opinion about our approach here in that after spending so much time on housing issues, I've come to the conclusion, unfortunately, that the city has very little say in actually how housing actually gets developed and built. There's so many factors involved in it. On the other hand, the city has a very strong finger on whether or not actually anything gets built. It's easy for us to completely discourage housing. And I think MeasureWise, the classic example of that. I asked staff to prepare a table of the development history for the last 10 years, which we've all gotten a copy of. Hopefully it'll be made available publicly because I think it's a fascinating read. And just for the public's information, so from 2014 to 2016, over that 3-year period, nearly 1,800 homes were entitled. When Measure Y went into effect in 2017 for the next 6 years, that number dropped to 182. Interestingly, those were all ownership units, but the vast majority of those were small lot subdivisions, very small projects. Every one of them would have fallen under the threshold that we have today. Measure K came along at the end of 2022, so you would have thought that 2023 would have been a reopening in Costa Mesa, and unfortunately we had 29 homes entitled at that time. For clarity, I have accepted the One Metro West project, which was approved in 2021. That's a little over 1,000 units. That's an anomaly. It really doesn't kind of belong in the calculation. And in 2024, we've had 6 units entitled, all rentals. We're going in the wrong direction here. It's just as clear as day to me. And so I think we need to take a very conservative approach about this. It's not about peeling back other government programs, because I don't think that's going to move the needle. I think it's about making sure that we listen to the development community and, importantly, the affordable housing development community. We have a project that Jamboree Housing has proposed that's been 5+ years in the making for 60 units. We need to do much better than that. On the in lieu fee, I don't see what's being proposed providing a genuine alternative for developers. In fact, I think it sends a message we're really not open for business here. So I think we need to revisit what that actually looks like as far as a potential discount, so it's actually a genuine opportunity for a home builder to consider. I hadn't planned on making any kind of broad statements about this. We've been talking about it for so long. But I think on March 19th, when we come back, we're going to have a pretty open and candid conversation about what needs to be here moving forward. I'm not willing to wait another 3 years for us to kickstart development. I know my colleagues also feel similarly. We've been waiting forever. We are in a competitive market. I want people to come to Costa Mesa because it's attractive to do so, and I think we all benefit accordingly. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so I'll say the last word. You wanted to say robust. I think you did want to say a robust discussion. however you want to characterize it. I look forward to it on March 19th. Okay, so in terms of the inclusionary housing ordinance, we are likely to pass one. It's one of the things we sort of committed to do in our housing element. And we have to do that, as most people know by now. We've talked about it at some length. That's something that was imposed on us by the state of California. So we've got to do it. Just recently, I think it was today, I got an email from Cecilia, and there's a thing that was created in, if I'm not mistaken, 2028. It's called the Orange County Housing Trust. And the Orange County Housing Trust gathers money, both public money and private money, for the purposes of distributing that money for affordable housing projects within the 34 cities of Orange County. I was coincidentally, I mean, I don't want to take too much credit for it or any credit for it, but it just happened when I was the chairman of the homelessness task force for ACCOC when they started that trust. And we cannot participate in that trust because we don't have a certified housing element. And so having a certified housing element is important, and by extension, then therefore having an inclusionary housing ordinance is important. But then the next question, of course, is what should be the content of that ordinance? And I'll say this is I think everybody comes to it and says, yeah, we want to have, housing. We want people to be warm, safe, and dry in the city of Costa Mesa. I don't think anybody questions that. I think we're all seven of us believe in that. And so the focus of the affordable housing ordinance is to create deed-restricted affordable housing, capital A, capital H, affordable housing as it's defined. But nobody sleeps in an ordinance. An ordinance doesn't keep anybody warm, safe, and dry. So the only way that this ordinance can make it more likely that we're going to have places where people of all incomes are warm, safe, and dry in housing and affordable housing in Costa Mesa. They don't have to move to Corona. They don't have to move to Culver City like my daughter did, or Downey like my son finally did, is to make an incentive for people to build in the city of Costa Mesa. Therefore, when I look at this ordinance, and to not, as Jeff said, basically he said it in a certain way, do no harm, right? Don't make an ordinance that's going to make it less likely for people to build in Costa Mesa, and then make it therefore less likely that people of all income levels will be warm, safe, and dry in the city of Costa Mesa. I'm worried about where we're going with this and whether or not what we're doing is counterproductive, and I don't want to do that. Therefore, I do believe, as Don said, and I did ask that question, I do believe we should talk to the very people that have been developing housing in Costa Mesa for the last 50 some odd years, 60 years, I think. We're 60, we did the 60th, and we did the 70th. It was this year of the 70th last year, right? I mean, certain people have been developing these housing, we know where they are. Some of them are out in the audience. Let's talk to them and see what would be an incentive for them and what wouldn't be. I think the $26.10 number is just an absolute non-starter. And I think the reason I think that that's important is because I do think that the affordable, creating through affordable housing, collecting those fees and creating affordable housing projects is an effective way to do it, as it's been done in Santa Ana, as it's been done in Anaheim, and many others by Jamboree Housing and other people, like the Diamond Project in Anaheim, for example, that's been around for a long time, and it's a beautiful project. I heard what the city manager said, and she'll probably be able to give us some additional information about the success that they've had in Huntington Beach. But when I looked at the slides that were provided by the staff on that, I was kind of underwhelmed by those particular examples. Only one of them had a reference to any low income units being produced. None of them had anything about very low, and the other three talk about moderate, and we're not even including moderate in our ordinance. Yeah, 26.10, that's, nobody's gonna build in Costa Mesa. So if we wanna kill it, if we wanna kill the building in Costa Mesa, if we want to basically replace Measure Y with another ordinance that is going to create the same, vapor lock, then I think that's the way to do it. But I'd really like people to build in Costa Mesa, building Costa Mesa quickly and now. I'm concerned about the direction we're going, and I'm not sure we're going to achieve our objective if we go in this direction. So that's all I have to say. We're adjourned. Oh, we got to make a motion. Motion to receive and file. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? We're adjourned.